All right, well, it's a new morning, and it's the middle of the week, I realize, but I wanted to clarify just a few things about our class for this week and talk a little bit more about how classroom response systems work and so forth. And so for the discussion this week, I wanted to just send a reminder to redirect the discussion toward finding and sharing best practices. This isn't an opportunity necessarily. It's not a it's my creation discussion, although that is nice for those of you who have shared something you've made. But it's a discussion about looking online, finding information about best practices for supporting active learning using an interactive whiteboard, or best practices for supporting active learning using a classroom response system. So remember, go back to what we've learned in the beginning of the semester on active learning and how do we support that mental activity, that manipulation and observation that students are doing with the different systems that you could use. So interactive whiteboard, a classroom response system, and then go from there. That's the challenge for the discussion this week. And then post the items that you found. If you find something that is a good article about supporting active learning using interactive whiteboard, or a good article about supporting active learning using a classroom response system, then post a link to that article and then just give us the gist of the article as well. What is it? How is this useful to your situation, your teaching as well, or your future teaching? So that's kind of redirecting that, I guess, the discussion and posting about that. Now, if you have used a classroom response system extensively in your class already, let's say you're a practicing teacher and you have used this Kahoot, for instance, a lot in your classroom, I want to challenge you to choose a new one for the assignment, for the active learning assignment. So don't use Kahoot if you've already used it a bunch of times in your class. Instead, pick a new one. Pick an opportunity, give it an opportunity for you to learn a new system. So maybe Poll Everywhere is something you can try out, or something else that I put on there let's see what I have on there, Pear Deck. So try some of these different systems out because you might be delightfully surprised by what they offer that maybe one system that you have been using does not offer. And then a caution too. I wanted to share a caution too about using these classroom response systems. So as I've mentioned sometimes in the discussion board, Kahoot, for instance, doesn't do a very good job of a few things. It does a great job of making the class competitive, getting the students all involved and having fun, kind of, not really fighting, but competing one with another. But what it doesn't do, and this is something to be a key in on, is that it doesn't allow you, or it doesn't make you feel like you can take a moment, stop and talk about what the students responded. And that's the idea with this. To support mental activity, you really need to stop and address any misconceptions or address any problems that students have or any questions that they may have. Kahoot is kind of the system that makes you want to continue on, go to the next question, hurry, quickly. But you need to stop and take a moment to do that, to address any misconceptions or talk about any concepts that you want to clarify. You should be doing this on a regular basis as a teacher. And then finally, of course, I have this information about Bloom's taxonomy. And for those of you who are familiar with this, hopefully this is a review, but for those who aren't, it's an important thing to understand. The best use of student response systems help us to get beyond just remembering and understanding information. So on the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy here, we have understand and remember. And this is just a way to think about a learning situation, something that you might have implemented or might be planning on implementing, and see if it's higher order learning or lower order learning. And we want to get to higher order learning. And so down at the bottom, the bottom two items here, remember and understand, are lower order learning. And then the top items, I guess I should choose a different color maybe for this one. The top items are higher order learning. So we want to get to the top items of applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And we want students to be able to get to these type of items beyond just questions that help them to recall or understand something. We want them to be able to apply concepts maybe, or analyze, drawing connections, or justifying a stand or decision, or producing new original work. How can a classroom response system be used to do this? beyond just remembering and understanding? Well, I have a few examples here in Poll Everywhere that I've created of questions that might get beyond. And surprise, they're not usually the multiple choice type questions, although you can do multiple choice with higher order learning. For instance, here's an example of a remembering and understanding question, right? In what year was the first known distance education? This is basically recalling what year that we know about this. Maybe it's something we've talked about in class. Um, and then here's another kind of question that might be a little higher order, might be understanding, but still probably, well, yeah, probably still under the lower order type of question because, again, it's a question of which is better for student learning. This requires students to think about whether distance or face-to-face learning is better for student learning or they're the same. But this is probably just an understanding level question as well. So if we want to get beyond those types of questions, I need to go back to my polls here and look at the type of questions that I think will do this. For instance, let's see here. Okay, so here's one that's kind of on the application level, right? Name one strategy you might use to differentiate content. And if you look at the type of question, it doesn't have the multiple choice answers. This is actually Poll Everywhere, and Poll Everywhere allows for text responses. So you can text in a response to this question. Name one strategy you might use to differentiate content. If you look at Bloom's taxonomy, this is probably more on the apply level. Use information in new situations. Thinking about, we've been learning about differentiation of learning in that class, so maybe we can now apply this to a new situation, my own classroom as a teacher, if I'm the learner in the class. So that might be apply or analyze at a little bit higher order, and it's an open-ended question, so that allows for multiple different types of answers. And so maybe you can see that, of course, there are types of questions, multiple choice type of questions, multiple choice types of questions can support applying and the higher order learning items that we're trying to get to. But it's maybe easier with some open-ended type of questions or other types of questions. Here's another example. This is probably a lower order question, but you can see the type of question it is. And this one asks students to identify the crocodile in this picture by clicking on it. But you can think more higher order with this, maybe, with this type of question. You can put up a picture and then have students click on the type of question or the answer that they should have. And this can go to higher order as well if you think about how it might apply to your teaching and learning situation. And let's see. Here's another apply level question. How can you increase social presence in distance learning? So again, it's asking students to apply the information that they have been learning about what is social presence and how does it relate to distance learning, and then apply that to how can you actually increase it during distance learning. All right, so here's another one that would be classifying. This is sort of an evaluative type of question. It says list the following items in order from highest social presence to lowest social presence. Mail, blogs, video conferencing, face-to-face class, email, discussion boards, and so forth. So instead of just having a simple question and then a couple of canned responses, you can actually ask students to list things in order, and this allows them to apply what they've been learning as well. Let's see if I can find one more. Yeah, I think we've got it. I think that's the idea anyway. You can do word cloud responses. Students respond and the answers come up in a word cloud in Poll Everywhere. So this is kind of highlighting Poll Everywhere, but also highlighting just this idea that you should really focus when you use classroom response systems on these higher order items. Now, not every question in your assignment has to be higher order if you're going to use a classroom for your assignment, but in order to support active learning, you have the students responding, and that's step one. If they're responding to the question, well, that's step one for supporting active learning. They're thinking about things, they're manipulating, so to speak, and observing the results, observing how well they did with the response. But if you can have some questions in there as well that support this higher order learning, like applying the questions or applying the topic to a new situation, or maybe justifying a stand or decision. Maybe there's a question in the classroom response system that allows them to take a stand or forces them to take a stand on a topic. And then afterward, you pause and you say, we're going to talk about this. Why did you take that stand? Or what was your reasoning behind this? That would be evaluating on Bloom's taxonomy. And that, again, supports higher mental activity. So we're talking back on active learning as well with that. Or there's maybe a way for them to draw connections among ideas. You might ask them to respond to, let's say, a simple multiple choice question about something, and then draw out from them reasons why they connected these different things. So I want you to think about that this week. And this was something that I felt like was lacking so far this week as we talk about the use of, interactive whiteboard software and classroom response systems. We need to be thinking about how to support the higher order learning, and that's again these items on this next to this larger rectangle here. Apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So just a little, I guess, midweek presentation about making sure that you support these types of activities. And if you do these types of things up higher, these higher order learning things, you'll certainly be supporting active mental learning among students.